All right, welcome. As the current roster stands for the Boston Bruins, I kind of just want to discuss their forward groups and, should, for whatever reason, Krejci and Bergeron not end up being signed, this is probably what the roster will look like. Start off, Brad Marchand will start the season on the injured reserve. He's due to come back sometime in December, could be late December. That's what the projections have, but, these timelines can vary greatly. He can come back sooner. He could be delayed a little bit. He could have a setback. We'll see. Unrestricted free agents, Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, literally your two top centers. So that's cool. Restricted free agents, Pavel Zacha. His qualifying offer is a $3 million qualifying offer. I have him in the depth chart because he's a restricted free agent, and teams kind of have to sign their restricted free agents. If a player doesn't sign their restricted free agent contract, they risk sitting out in the entire season, and it's not necessarily the best look on the market. This player is not willing to negotiate his contract. But teams also, need to sign their restricted free agents as well. Otherwise, and there's a reason it's exceedingly rare for restricted free agents to not sign, because then you're risking players you've drafted and young prospects not signing with your team and going elsewhere, like an Adam Fox scenario. That was a little different, but nonetheless, a prospect drafted by a team and didn't sign there, didn't want to sign there, didn't want to play there. Ended up in New York. So that's kind of what you're risking if you're not signing your restricted free agents. It's kind of a double-edged sword for the team and the player. So I'd anticipate that to get done. Even if it goes to arbitration, he'll probably end up getting his qualifying offer at $3 million. I don't see him being paid less than that, but he's definitely not worth $3 million or more. So I think that's going to be where they settle. Cap space is currently at $4,758,333. Assuming Zacha takes up $3 million of that, you're down to $1.758 million. It's early. There's no reason to panic. There's been rumors, and I think these are just purely rumors at this point. I don't think we've gotten any clarification from Sweeney, the GM of the Bruins, but essentially Marchand and McAvoy, the rumors state that they're not going to be put on LTIR, which would not free up cap space to start the season, which would be a little concerning. There's pros and cons to putting players on LTIR, so it wouldn't be, from a managerial standpoint, it wouldn't be a terrible move, but from a cap standpoint, it would hurt quite a bit. So we'll see how much cap space does that free up in addition to that extra $1.75 million, and is that enough to sign Bergeron and Krejci? You're likely going to have to move a defensive player. They have 8 defensive players, including Zaboral, who should see everyday NHL game time. It is what it is at this point. 6 of those 8 guys are making $3 million or more. They probably should move a contract if they're not already in talks already. Thank goodness. But the market for defensemen, the trade market for defensemen is, it's abundant. You have teams, you have Vancouver with Myers. They're looking to dump Myers' contract. You have Minnesota in their Suter Parise buyout situation. They might be looking to dump Matt Dumba. Who else we got? Krug in St. Louis. There's been a lot of rumors that Krug is on the trade market. And a lot of these teams are willing to retain salary as well for those players, which would put them around like a $5.5 million player. When you're trying to trade someone like a Riley, a Forbert, or a Grzelcyk for $3 to $3.7 million a year, a Krug or a top 4 defenseman may be a more attractive offer from another team. So at this point, the Bruins are probably going to have to pay up to free up some cap space. They're probably giving up a pick or two. So I'm sure that's why that hasn't gotten done yet. I'm sure that's a whole nother process for Bruins management to figure out. In the meantime, we're just going to take a look at the forward group pre-Krejci and Bergeron signing. It's also of note that Krejci and Bergeron don't have a term or a dollar amount agreed to with the Bruins organization. So it's still kind of in the air. We'll see if there's cap space. I'm sure both players will come back. If there's no cap space, or each player's not willing to sign at like $1 million each for a year, they may not end up signing. It really depends on what Sweeney does from here on out. We'll see. Getting into it though, first line, you're probably going to have Taylor Hall, Charlie Coyle, and David Pastrnak. You don't have much center depth. That kind of brings Coyle up to the first line. Two of your unrestricted free agents are your top two centers, and you traded away Eric Haula for Zacha, meaning Coyle, with his contract north of over $5 million annual average value, is probably the first line center. The Hall, Coyle, Pastrnak line, we saw this play out last year. It wasn't very successful. There's not a lot of offense generated. Once another center got switched in between Hall and Pastrnak, we saw a lot more offensive success. So we may see Zacha get some first line time with Hall and Pastrnak. May happen. That's going to make negotiations for next year with Zacha, should that be a one-year contract, a lot more difficult. Because then Zacha's going to put up career highs in points, probably goals and assists. If you're playing with a former Hart winner and a Maurice Rocket Richard winner, MVP and best goal scorer in the league, points should come. Obviously, we've seen them play with Charlie Coyle, and it hasn't worked out. So it may or may not work out with Zacha. We'll have to see. But I'd be surprised if Coyle didn't start the season on that first line, and I'd also be surprised if Zacha didn't swap into that first line center spot. Should Krejci and Bergeron not get signed? Should either Krejci or Bergeron get signed, they're the first line center right away. There's no question on that. Second line, this is where you really start to get interesting with goal production. Trent Frederick, he was the third line winger last year. Probably moves up to the second line because of Marchand's absence. Again, Zacha or Coyle and DeBrusk. DeBrusk has shown he does pretty well with top 6 minutes. He does pretty well depending on who he's paired with. We'll see if that production's there. We'll see how Jim Montgomery wants to play around with this lineup a bit. But I'd imagine DeBrusk has a top 6 role to start the season. And I'd imagine that Pastrnak gets that first line winger position over DeBrusk. DeBrusk is a left wing, so we could see him be on the left wing. We'll see. There's a lot of ifs with this lineup as it stands, and a lot of playing around Jim Montgomery can too. Whereas if you have Bergeron and Krejci back, there's not as much playing around, but you're going to get a lot more production with Bergeron and Krejci back. So going into the third line, you got Nick Foligno with Tomas Nosek centering that line and Craig Smith on the wing. This will be an interesting line. Nosek, I actually like Nosek a lot. He can't finish with his goal scoring. Creates a lot of plays. He's very good in his own zone. He can pass the puck. He can shoot the puck. It doesn't go in the net for him. And it hasn't for years, so I'm very reluctant to call it puck luck. I think he just needs to work on finishing. I think he has for years, and so that's why we don't see the stats with Nosek. But other than the goals and the point production, he's a solid two-way forward. So that's good. He's decent in the face-off circle as well. Craig Smith, hoping for a bounce-back season from Craig Smith. I think on a line with Nick Foligno and Tomas Nosek, you won't get that. We'll obviously see. He was very good when he was on a line with Krejci and Taylor Hall. He may find chemistry with Pavel Zacha should he get that opportunity. That's something for the new coach to explore. Fourth line's really where it gets very arbitrary. You have Chris Wagner, Jack Studnicka, and Oscar Steen. Steen's a natural center. Studnicka's a natural center. Wagner is a right winger, but I have him on the left wing because Steen and Studnicka are both young and need to work on their development. I think if anyone's going to be moving wings, it's the more veteran player. But you also have Mark McLaughlin and AJ Greer, who you can call up or insert into the lineup. Both are young players. McLaughlin looked good in a Bruins uniform last year. We'll see if he can keep up that production. He didn't have many minutes, not much playing time last year, but when he was in the lineup, he looked decent. Greer is also a young guy. I like him a lot. He's had multiple seasons of experience in the NHL, but very limited experience. Fourth line roles in 6 to 14 games a year. So we'll see what he can bring from that. Greer's looked decent when he's been in an NHL lineup, but he still needs to take that next jump. to being an everyday player, and he hasn't quite done that yet. And he could do that in Boston. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, he's only 25. So I think Greer and McLaughlin will get quite a bit of opportunity to, at the very least, play on that fourth line. As we're looking at it right now, it's a decent defensive group. You have a lot of guys that can and will play solid defense. The issue is going to be goal scoring. The goals need to come from somewhere, and there's not a whole lot of guys that score goals on this team, especially with the absence of Krejci, who's a fantastic playmaker and just generates goals out of nowhere, and Bergeron, who just makes plays, puts the puck in the net, gets some clutch goals. Not a bad point producer as well. That hurts having those two guys out of the lineup. So for whatever reason, should they not sign Bergeron or Krejci, and that's a big for whatever reason, because they should and likely will sign Bergeron and Krejci, or at least one of them. Fingers crossed. Should they not? Is this a playoff team? My answer would be no. I think teams like Ottawa, much more high-octane offense. All of these teams that will be fighting for the wild card spot in the Atlantic Division have some type of hole on their team. For the Bruins, it'll be their offense. Their defense is very good. You have an Ullmark and Swayman tandem in net, which is great. You have a 1A, 1B guy right there. Both guys, at this point, are starting goaltenders on really any other team in the NHL. Hate on Ullmark all you want. Dude had a great year. Big Ullmark fan. And he has corgis. I have a corgi. He's right here sleeping. I'm a big fan of Ullmark. What's it called? The Senators. That's where I was going with this. Senators don't have a lot of defensive depth. They have a lot of young guys who could grow, and their defense could develop. But at the moment, that's really their weak point. they need defense. Buffalo still needs to develop their young team. Again, their defense is questionable. Owen Power should help. Detroit's bumped up a bit, but my concern with Detroit is still their offense. Perron, they had a Perron. He's a power play guy. He scores most of his goals on the power play. Will the goaltending pan out? Nedeljkovic and Ville Husso. We'll see. I think should this be the lineup going into the year, which I really hope it's not, it's going to be a dogfight for a playoff spot in the Atlantic, and I don't think the lineup as is a playoff team. And should the Bruins make the playoffs, I don't know. You're looking at a kind of embarrassing first round. But that doesn't just go from Boston. That goes from most of the Atlantic teams. So we'll see. Aside from the whole Bergeron Krejci thing, thoughts? This is just as is right now. It's July 24th. We still got months before the season starts. This is something to keep an eye on, the Bergeron Krejci thing, the Zacha arbitration thing. See how that pans out, what the contract terms become of that. See what Jim Montgomery does at training camp. This could change. This is similar to what Cap Friendly had. It's not identical. Cap Friendly had, what did they have? They had Smith on the second line, Foligno on the Jack Studnicka on the third line. So it's similar. They also had Chris Wagner in here. They had Steen centering this fourth line, which could be an interesting option. I think Steen will see some opportunity to play the center role. We'll see how much opportunity he gets with a plethora of centers. Right? You got Coyle, you got Zacha, you got Steen, you got Studnicka, you got McLaughlin. Trent Frederick's a natural center. So we'll see. We'll see how much opportunity he gets. Frederick hasn't seen really any opportunity to be that centerman. Just a few games. So let me know what you guys think. What do you make of this? Do you think with this roster and the defense and the goaltending, can they compete for a playoff spot? That's a big question. I'm hoping so. I'm a Bruins fan, but at the same time, question marks. And that's where we can get into the whole discussion. Is it okay to have a tank year, kind of a rebuilding year? This is supposed to be a stronger draft than this past year. And I feel like every year it's supposed to be a strong draft. I don't think this team's going to go into full tank mode. It might just be like a top 15, top 16 pick would be a tank for this year. That's what missing the playoffs would be like a tank year per se in my terms for this Bruins organization, because the expectation of Boston sports teams is you make the playoffs every year and you compete for a championship every year. And if you don't make the playoffs, it's an utter failure of a season. It is what it is. Looking at you, Boston Red Sox, see what you guys can do. So we'll see. What do you guys think? Again, excluding the whole Bergeron and Krejci thing, because that's a whole nother can of worms I'm not diving into. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.